In the near future, Earth will sustain so much damage from nuclear war, deforestation, and climate change that most cities will gradually collapse. In addition to a severe oxygen deficit, there is a scarcity of food and electricity. One of the few cities still standing by 2067 is in Australia, and it has survived because of synthetic oxygen. But this contaminated oxygen makes people sick, giving rise to a condition called the sickness. As utility workers, Jude, Ethan Whyte's best friend, and he work together to stabilize the neutral reactor and restore power to the city. Their supervisor scans them at the end of the workday to make sure everyone is still in good health. When a coworker cancels his shift for the following day, Ethan does the shift in order to accrue additional oxygen credits. While traveling home, Ethan witnesses a demonstrator arguing that oxygen should not be considered a luxury and that people should make sacrifices for future generations. Later that night, when Ethan's wife Xantha arrives, he gives her a new oxygen mask. As they play, Xantha vomits blood because she has the sickness, but she convinces Ethan that she is okay. Sometime later, Ethan is summoned to the offices of crony cops, and Jude joins him. Before transporting them to the lab, they meet Regina, the company's chief technology officer, who promises Ethan can help them preserve humanity. It turns out they're working on the Chronicle, a time machine built by Richard 20 years ago. They've been testing it for a few minutes by sending a clock, but they've also sent radio waves and received a reply from 400 years in the future with the words "Send Ethan Whyte." Regina believes that people from the future have discovered a cure for the sickness and will only deliver it to Ethan. The crew doesn't know how to bring Ethan back, so he'll have to track down the folks who delivered the message in order to return. Following the meeting, Ethan and Jude head to a bar to discuss Regina's proposal. Ethan is reluctant to leave Xantha, but Jude tells out that staying would mean Xantha dying, whereas leaving would mean saving her for years to come. When Jude brings up Richard, Ethan tells him that his father vanished, leaving his 8-year-old son with nothing but a self-destruct note and a strange device on his wrist. Ethan believes that if Richard had been present, his mother would not have died, thus he refuses to do the same to Xantha. Ethan considers his 8th birthday after Jude departs. He had waited all day for his father, but Richard was late, and his present was a strange box. He put young Ethan's hand into the box, telling him he'd have to make a big decision eventually, and then an electronic bracelet tightened around his wrist, forcing it to bleed. Richard told the youngster that the bracelet would not come off and left the house. Then, recalling his mother's death, Ethan resolves to return home to inform Xantha about Crony Corp's plot. He doesn't want to leave her, but Xantha begs him not to use her as a reason to postpone helping humanity and to believe. She also lists all of the students in her class who have died, expressing her fear. Later that evening, Ethan walks to the roof to observe the city, feverishly attempting to remove the bracelet as he recalls the day his mother died on the streets. Jude discovered him that day and shared his oxygen mask with him. Ethan yells in the present as he makes his decision. The next morning, Ethan leaves a metal flower for Xantha and promises to return, unaware that she is awake and crying. When he arrives at the crony cop's office, he strikes a deal with Regina. He won't leave until Xantha receives the first dose of the treatment. Regina agrees, and they rush to the lab, where the experts show Ethan how to use the unique suit and a little pocket computer called Archie. When Ethan is ready, he steps into the machine, and electricity wraps around his body until the machine shoots an energy explosion, sending Ethan into the future. A hole appears in the sky, and Ethan plummets at enormous speed until he lands in the middle of a jungle, fainting instantaneously. When Ethan awakens, he finds his suit is on fire and immediately removes it, crawling away from it just before it explodes. Then Ethan's body must adjust to the sunlight and clean oxygen, which have allowed flora to sprout throughout the area. Ethan uses Archie to verify his location after admiring nature for a time, but Archie is unable to connect to any satellite. He eventually releases a magnet into the earth, allowing Archie to detect adjacent structures and guiding him to the nearest facility. Ethan is astonished to find a skeleton with a hole in the head at the door, but the true shock comes when he notices the skeleton is wearing the suit with his name on it. He also discovers a rusting Archie beneath the leaves, as well as Richard's bracelet on the skeleton's wrist. However, this one has a green light. This indicates he's going to die on this expedition, which causes him to panic. He attempts to open the facility's doors but is unsuccessful, so he asks the rusting Archie to play the previous tape. The machine plays a distorted voice claiming it's better this way because no one suffers, followed by 2 voices arguing and a gunshot. The battery dies at that point, and the rusting Archie shuts off. Then he discovers a wire wrapped around the rusting Archie, so Ethan gets some wire from his suit and wraps it around his own Archie, allowing her to detect a beacon signal for the first time. Ethan follows the signal across the jungle and discovers 2 oxygen dispensers but no one. Later that evening, with Archie's assistance, Ethan builds a fire. He also discovers some berries that Archie cannot identify, so Ethan eats one and throws the rest away since they taste terrible. Following that, Ethan asks Archie to use the constellations to confirm the year 2474, which reminds him of how he and Richard used to stare at the skies together. However, the recollection abruptly ends when Richard begins to feel ill, puking, and hallucinating while a rainstorm sweeps through the neighborhood. As his hallucinations worsen, Ethan sees a ball of light crash near his camp and spots a man racing toward him to stab him in the chest. Ethan drops out, and when he comes to, the strange man is Jude, who injected him with medicine to treat the poison Ethan got from the berry. The following morning, Jude says that Crony Corp was monitoring Ethan's vitals and saw he was dying, so they used their remaining power on the Chronicle to send Jude for help. The next morning, Ethan shows Jude the skeleton, but Jude does not believe it is Ethan. They then use Archie to continue tracking the signal until they discover another facility that scans Ethan's eye and promptly opens the door. Except for a flashing panel with Ethan's name on it, the interior is pitch black. When he pushes enter, the bracelet on his wrist activates and draws blood for DNA analysis. The light on the bracelet suddenly turns green and the computer turns on the lights now that Ethan's identity has been validated. The pair is surprised to find themselves at Crony Corp's lab, and the computer says that the portal will open in 4 hours. Jude is relieved, but Ethan is concerned since his bracelet is the same color as the skeleton's. Ethan examines the computer logs and discovers a holographic recording made by Richard during his time at Crony Corp. They buried a monitoring station that would send data from the future when the air became breathable, according to Richard. The crew was expecting a response from 2474 in the next entry, but all they got was the phrase "Send Ethan Whyte." Regina requested if they could convey the matter now, but the report stated that there was a power outage in 2474. The lab system abruptly shuts down, and the computer notifies Ethan to a problem with the nuclear core power. Ethan orders Archie to do a diagnostic, and they discover that the power feed is contaminated, preventing them from returning to 2067. The computer also tells them that if they do not resolve the problem before the countdown concludes, a nuclear explosion will occur. Jude rushes to get tools, while Ethan is preoccupied with the consequences of what they've discovered. Crony Corp was aware of the power outage because they received the message long before phoning him, and the message was sent from here, implying that they had repaired the damage and discovered a remedy. He questions why Crony Corp didn't notify them of the power outage and instead sent Jude instead of a medic, but Jude simply states that he was the only one who volunteered. Jude calms Ethan down and begs him to consider how serious the situation is, so Ethan agrees to travel to the access tunnel for repairs as long as they look for the sender of the message afterwards. The pair travels through the forest to the city, only to find it in ruins and overgrown with plants. As they investigate the region, they discover several skeletons, and Ethan discovers that no one survived the year he came from. The Earth just waited for mankind to perish before replenishing itself. Concerned, they proceed to Xana's school and discover the skeletons of the kids, implying that they perished right there in the classroom. Then he discovers another skeleton, Xana's, with the metal flower in her hand. As grief consumes him, Ethan recalls the night Richard summoned them to a location, but they were followed by a stranger who murdered his mother and took Ethan's breathing mask. Richard never showed up, but Jude located and saved Ethan. Ethan has a panic attack as a result of the flashback, but Jude helps him calm down. Ethan sobs and laments leaving Xana alone, still believing they will be powerless to do anything. However, Jude claims that they are better off because no one is hurting, which surprises Ethan because those are the words he heard from the rusting Archie. Ethan replays the footage to corroborate it, and he understands the debate ends with Jude shooting him. Jude pulls out his revolver at that point, and Ethan wonders why he has it when there's nothing to fight about, and debate erupts until Archie tells them that the nuclear detonation is only 2 hours away. Jude leads Ethan to the underground, where they discover the nuclear core has damaged, forcing them to redirect the power. Their attempts quickly fail, and the computer attempts to close the door for safety. When Ethan hears the computer say that the chamber needs depressurization, he removes the bar. The oxygen purge is then activated by Ethan, which restores power but causes him to faint. Jude, starving for oxygen, cracks the glass, allowing Ethan to live. When the couple returns to the lab, they discover that they only have 37 minutes before the portal launches. Ethan unexpectedly unlocks a door and realizes it leads to his bones, forcing him to recognize that he cannot change fate. While Ethan is changing the batteries in the 2 Archies, he accuses Jude of plotting to kill him. Then he has the rusting Archie play the last thing the other Ethan saw. Jude says he has no intention of shooting Ethan, and a fight develops, with Jude urging they stay. Ethan then pushes open another door to find the utility room, but there are no masks. Ethan pushes Jude aside and rushes to the computer to play a log recorded on his 8th birthday. Richard admits to making a mistake, but the message is cut short when Jude turns off the power. Ethan locks Jude in the utility room and turns on the power again to view the message. Richard stated that he had done everything for his son and wanted to express his gratitude, so he called home and requested little Ethan to go for a stroll with his mother to meet with him. Before he could leave, Regina and Jude barged into the lab and cornered him, arguing that humans were the true infection. Richard refused to comply and said that he had coded the system so that only Ethan could activate it in the future. Regina shot Richard once the scientist confirmed that it was possible to send at least one person to address the power problem. At that point, Jude gets free and tries unsuccessfully to stop the recording, revealing the remainder of the truth. Regina dispatched a squad to kill Ethan's mother and appointed Jude as Ethan's guardian. Ethan, distraught, leaps on Jude, accusing him of using him all these years. So Jude assaults him, slamming him against the wall while begging him to fight. Because Ethan refuses, Jude pulls out his gun and points it at Ethan's head, but Ethan does not fight back, claiming he trusts in his brother. Seeing Ethan in such anguish reminds Jude of the night they met, and remorse overtakes him, so he apologizes to Ethan and then deletes himself. In the present, Regina is preparing the elite group for their escape, and she orders a guard to kill Ethan as soon as they arrive in the future. Regina waits for the countdown to end in the present, but instead of a gateway opening, the chronicle shuts off. Inside the machine, they discover Ethan's present of a bunch of plants, a can, and a film of Richard's murder. Ethan destroys the chronicle so that it would never be used again. Newscasts in the present will highlight Regina's arrest and how scientists are collaborating with plants to begin ecological restoration. When a chronic cop employee sends the can to Xantha because it has her name on it, she cries when she sees a genuine flower. Ethan later buries Jude's body near the river and places the metal flower on the grave. When he notices a butterfly nearby, he recalls his father teaching him that everything in the universe is related through time, and he runs back to the facility to discover his skeleton has vanished. Ethan sprints through the forest again to reach the city, only to discover that humanity has survived and developed buildings that safely blend with nature. Anyway, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you can watch more movie recaps like this. See you next time.